And welcome to First Bite, the Pride of Detroit preview podcast, where we are previewing the Lions off-season, even though we're kind of in the midst of it already. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the managing editor of Pride of Detroit and your co-host for First Bite. With me this episode, Chris Perfett is back. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I basically shanghaied my way on. I forced my way into this podcast because I've been working so much. I missed the last two Sunday ones. We won't talk about that much here. We'll save that for the Sunday conversation. But I basically told Jeremy, it's like, no, I'm back. Give me this.
And
give me the aux.
We're happy to have you back, and we've got an interesting topic this week. As you've probably, if you've been listening to the podcast, know, we've been profiling head coaching and general manager candidates for the Detroit Lions. We're going with the very first one that was interviewed, which is in it of itself kind of interesting, a name that you're all probably quite familiar with, and that's former Bengals head coach Marvin Lewis.
Don't turn off the podcast. No, don't turn off the podcast.
Yeah, I know. You might be fast forwarding to the next episode because it might not be the most exciting candidate. But we brought along a special guest, as we normally do, to maybe get into the nitty gritty, maybe find out some positive things about a guy who went 0-7 in the playoffs as his reign with the Bengals. And that man is Joe Goodberry. You probably know him from The Athletic, Bengals Wire, Cincy Jungle. I mean, he's been through the ringer there over in Cincy. Joe, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. And this is my favorite topic of the last, since forever for me. My whole Bengals fandom in my adult life has been Marvin Lewis, and it's been a long conversation. And now I get to relive it again.
Well, yeah.
We're
apologies
sorry.
in advance. Hopefully this won't be too painful. But let's just start with the very basics. If you were to say, like, what are the prime tenets of a Marvin Lewis coach team, what are they?
You know, it's funny because I see Marvin Lewis's name pop up, and I believe the two first visits he's had or interviews he's had is Detroit Lions, New York Jets. And I kind of look at the Bengals and I say, well, they're not so dissimilar. And I say that because, these teams haven't won recently, and we're going on a long streak, the Lions and Bengals right here, of not, succeeding in the postseason. But when I look at it, I say, okay, so what does Marvin bring to the table for those organizations? Why would he be attractive for those ones in particular? And maybe it's because of the similarities, right? Because he can at least raise the level of where you've been and get it to at least a respectable level. And I think when you're in the basement, and no offense to that, I mean, we're there with you guys.
Yep.
When you're in the basement, you'll love to get up to the first floor, even if that means you're not getting to that ultimate goal, which we all know is winning a Super Bowl and bringing that Lombardi trophy home, but you just want to know you're on the right track. You want some semblance of respect in the league. You're tired of being, the teams that no one really talks about. And I think Marvin can at least get you there. And I think that's why he's interesting for a lot of other organizations, because if you have been able to at least, and I call it a success in Cincinnati, and I know we'll get to that and what that really means, and if that's something your franchise may want. But I think that when you've had success in Cincinnati under Mike Brown, under the conditions that he did, and I'm sure we'll get into that too, I think that is very appealing to a lot of teams and a lot of organizations to, okay, this guy has at least had some success and can get us to the level of at least on the right path to get us on that track.
And to that credit, I did want to bring this up before we got too much into it, because I know Jeremy leads with the 0-7 stat for his playoffs, but it's important to look at who the Bengals were before Marvin Lewis came to town. He came in 2003. They hadn't had a winning season since 1990 under Sam Weish. Like the Dave Shula and Bruce Coslett and the Dick LeBeau hires, none of them won in Cincinnati. And, there's extenuating circumstances with Cincinnati. The owner is, I hate to say it, a meddler at the end of the day. And I know there was some back and forth control over personnel issues, but, Marvin Lewis, for better or worse, did come in and put Cincinnati back on the track to at least, getting to the playoffs and winning wild cards and winning divisional titles.
That's right. The 80s were the glory days for the Bengals. They went to 2 Super Bowls, didn't win either of them. They ran into the buzzsaw in the dynasty of the 49ers, and, that happens. But it really was the transition from Paul Brown, who is one of the, Mount Rushmores of the NFL to Mike Brown, who has been, what's the opposite of Mount Rushmore, right? And that's, Mike Brown would be on that one, whatever that is. But, and that started right in 90 or 91. And since then, I mean, the dark ages were the 90s, is what we call them, to go from such a high point in the 80s to just being dreadful. I remember thinking the Bengals weren't a real NFL team when I was a kid. I was born in 87. So, I'm like 6 years old. Like, are they a real team? I mean, they're terrible. To the point of, you need somebody, and I remember at the time, 2002, we look back now, we see the letters a bunch of old players wrote to Mike Brown and published in the local newspaper of, you need to hire Marvin Lewis. You need to go after this guy, being in Baltimore, winning a Super Bowl as a defense coordinator there. He's the guy who could bring respectability for whatever reason. They must have known at the time that he was the guy that could maybe challenge Mike Brown into raising the level a little bit. And they were right on that call. And Mike Brown listened. And that was the thing, really. If there's there's a lot of details in that 16 years, but if there's a trend throughout that 16, it's the more power going to Marvin Lewis and less coming from Mike Brown, all the way to the point of when he left, when Marvin left the organization, it's been widely reported that Mike Brown wasn't ready to do that yet. Still, he would have probably extended him if he could have. He really respected him. He believed he was a good coach and that he could get this team to where they needed to go. But really, it was his family, and now what we call Duke Tobin, the GM, he's the director of player personnel. He let the kids and Duke go through it and make the decision and find Zach Taylor. So I think, when you look at it from 2003 to 2018, that transition of power really went away from Mike Brown. And I think, that's big in looking at Marvin Lewis and saying, well, what could he have done with a real franchise? Or what could he have done with a franchise that gave him all the tools, an indoor practice facility, an entire scouting staff? The Bengals have the smallest personnel department in the NFL. And Marvin had no GM. So he did a lot of that. And I kind of wonder too, are any of these teams bringing him in to consider him in a GM role? I know they're, does it say directly he was interviewed for that coaching job? Or are some of these teams looking at him like, is there can you have a hand in both areas there? Because the Bengals require their coaches to scout, and they are the ones that are basically leading a lot of the pro scouting and college scouting for the players they want to draft. And it's not the same everywhere. So I think Marvin may want to continue some of that.
There's a lot of interesting information there. I think the fact that he's kind of walked the line between GM and head coach is definitely valuable. And this, I think I've seen some people throw out the theories that maybe this interview was just more of an information gathering type of thing where you're asking him, who would you hire as GM and who would you hire as head coach and things like that. And obviously a guy that's been in the NFL for as long as he has a ton of knowledge about that sort of stuff. But the lines have also been talking about lines of communication and how important that is and how the power structure needs to be run smoothly. And if you have a guy that knows how to run both sides, well, I think that makes him an intriguing candidate. Now, I do want to talk about his legacy in Cincy because it sounds like you even feel maybe a little bit conflicted. Obviously didn't get the Lombardi Trophy, didn't get a playoff win, but it sounds like you think, well, maybe under another franchise it could have been possible. Maybe if their power structure was a little more, understandable or logical, I guess maybe.
Right.
Do you think most people in Cincy were done with him by that point, or do you think maybe a lot of them thought maybe the Bengals organization just kind of did him wrong in the way they kind of handled things while he was there?
It's a tough balance because at the time, I think everyone could have walked away from Marvin Lewis after the 2015 playoff game against the Steelers that just ended in a complete meltdown. And it was really a microcosm of every time Marvin lost the locker room. And that happened. 16 years, he rebuilt the roster 4 times. In 2003, he had to come in and get money to sign free agents. Bengals never did that before. And he signed a bunch of low run guys that, came in and helped fill out a terrible roster that had the number one pick. They selected Carson Palmer, but he had to rebuild it then. They got to the playoffs by 2005. They went 8-8 that first year. He really was quickly 8-8, and then 11-5 in 2005. So they had a chance. I think in 2005, Carson Palmer gets his knee blown out in the second play of the game. Deep pass to Chris Henry, and he's down. Your franchise quarterback, you lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Steelers go on to win that Super Bowl. It's like right there, you're like, geez, you could have beat the team that won the Super Bowl right then and there. And They were confident they were going to beat them. They won that division. They beat them in Pittsburgh just a few weeks before that. They lose a bunch of guys. They whiff on the 05 draft because David Pollock, Odell Thurman, and Chris Henry, just as good as they were wiped off the NFL map for some of their own flaws and own issues within 2 years. And when you miss on an entire draft, it has ramifications when you can't keep extending, average veterans or even some of your cornerstone players, losing Takeo Spikes and Justin Smith and guys like that ended up playing for another 10 years at an extremely high level. So we rebuilt them one more time. It was for 2009, 2008. Carson Palmer tears his ulnar ligament in his elbow, and 2008 was a disaster. And they said, okay, we need to do something. We can't rely on Carson Palmer. We're gonna have to rebuild the run game, rebuild the defense, rebuild the offensive line. They hired Mike Zimmer to be defensive coordinator, and it worked. The defense was good. The running game was good. They signed Cedric Benson. He leads their running attack. 2009, they get back to the playoffs. They play the Jets week 17 and the wild card game. That was a mistake. I mean, they could have beaten the Jets week 17 and played somebody else. I don't remember now. They decided we'll rest, we'll hang out, we'll play the Jets 2 weeks in a row. Jets and Rex Ryan handed them a big fat L that week. So they gear up the next year, sign a bunch of free agents, sign Terrell Owens, right? They're going to have this high-flying offense. We're back. Carson Palmer's elbow feels good. We're going to lead the league in offense this year with this defense. Blew up in their face completely. Carson Palmer said, I'm out of here. You guys will never win. I'll never step foot in Paul Brown Stadium again. Wow. Mike Brown says, no, you won't. You will play for this team or you will retire. So that's the type of dynamic right there, right? Meanwhile, they're telling Carson Palmer's telling Marvin Lewis, you have to fire the offensive coordinator. We've had the same guy for 8 years. It's done. It's too stagnant. We got to get rid of him. This is in January. The Bengals are going to coach the Senior Bowl, and they hired Jay Gruden out of the UFL, was it at the time? The Florida Tuskers. Jay Gruden's brother of John Gruden really never coached in the NFL. It worked. Carson Palmer was retired for all intents and purposes for that first 6 weeks or so, and they drafted Andy Dalton in round 2, and they made the playoffs 5 straight years. He rebuilt it. That was that rebuild again, and they had, to be honest, if you ask a lot of people, especially personnel people or people that do evaluation, 2015 was probably the most talented roster in the entire NFL. I mean, they were talking about guys like Marvin Jones was the second receiver, Mohamed Sanu, Andrew Hawkins, the 2 first-round tight ends, and Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert. Gresham making the Pro Bowl. Offensive lineman, Andrew Whitworth is, in my opinion, be a Hall of Famer. Andre Smith, first-rounder at right tackle. Kevin Zeitler, first-rounder at right guard. Clint Bowling was a good, long 8-year starter at left guard. They were good. Jeremy Hill was still good. Giovanni Bernard was still good. They blew it in 2015 after going to the playoffs 5 straight years and 5 straight losses in the playoffs, all for different reasons. Guys were hurt, quarterbacks getting hurt, whatever the case may be. They can never get over the hump. But it was also a sign that they can never get over the hump even in primetime games or against really good teams. They were terrible in those games. And you look and you say, okay, the franchise is limited. The quarterback, Andy Dalton, was limited. I mean, he's an average guy. The roster was tremendous, and the coaching staff is tremendous. Hugh Jackson, Mike Zimmer, Jay Gruden. You had guys who ended up being head coaches. And then you look at Marvin Lewis and you say, can he beat good teams? Can he beat good coaches? And I think at that point we were all done with it. So that's the long of the what do you feel about him? I don't know. I respect him. I'm happy for the playoffs and the fun. It was great memories, a lot of real good chances. I think they could have won it in 2015 and in 05, but he just couldn't do it.
I mean, it sounds like he basically did, at least during the regular season, as much as he could possibly do with all the dysfunction around him, mostly from ownership, but couldn't get it done in the playoffs. Go ahead, Ryan.
One of the things, sorry, Jeremy. No, I was just going to say, like, that 2015 team, too, I just wanted to marvel at that because I know that was, like, second in DVOA. And as you said, you look at that roster, like, probably the 1 year we got of Tyler Eifert where he was mostly healthy. Yeah. So, like, that, and for a guy whose background is defense, that was a year where he just had just a high, as you say, a high-flying offense and all of that. So he clearly knows how to hire, an offensive coordinator. I guess my 2 questions looking at him would be, looking forward is like how much that translates to the modern NFL that's going on, although we can talk about that a little later. But I did want to get some background on, like, because Marvin Lewis, he goes out in he goes out in 2019. He's no longer on the team. We haven't heard from him, in about 2 years. So I don't know if you can fill us in on what he's been doing since then, because I know he's been with Arizona State, but I'm kind of curious if anything he's been doing at Arizona State has engendered him to be thought again in the NFL ranks, or if it's just kind of been a holding pattern for him.
He was going to retire completely. So, I mean, that was always his goal. I believe it was his daughter that went to Arizona State University and ended up living in Arizona. So he moved out there, and is the reason why the Bengals actually signed Vontaze Burfict also out of Arizona State, was because he had connections there, and he said, I think this guy will actually work out. He'll be okay in the NFL, which he was half right. And so his buddy Herm Edwards gets the head coaching job there, and Herm's like, I can bring you on. And I forget what rule it was that he couldn't take the coordinator position there. So he took an assistant position, and then did take over coordinator, but then ended up not coaching this year because of the COVID situation. So I don't think it was anything that he did that endeared him more to teams. I think it's just that teams realized he is still willing or wanting to coach. There was an interview recently, and I can't remember who did it now, and I feel terrible because it was probably somebody that I frequently talk with. But they talked to Marvin throughout the year, and it was – the spark was rekindled for him. That last year with the Bengals, he had to fire Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator, who's doing fine with the Steelers now. But for whatever reason, it didn't work with the Bengals. And Marvin had to coach the defensive side of the ball like he never has. Usually when you get a guy who's an offensive guy or a defensive guy, they'll have that hand on that side, of course. Marvin kind of ended up, both hands off throughout the 16 years, to the point where he was a really good manager. He knew he would hire good coordinators. They can handle it. He can handle the more mundane things, or, it's the important stuff, but really not the day-to-day game planning. And I think once he got back into it, it rekindled something in him. And they were okay. They, for really not doing it as a full-time job and still being the head coach, they were okay on defense for that final stretch. So I think going back and then coaching some young guys and doing that in college, I think maybe rekindled it a little bit. So it must be him reaching out and saying, I'm ready if you guys are interested. And he's getting enough interest that I think it's warranted at this point that he may get a job.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about his philosophy in terms of what kind of football team he's trying to build, and if the Lions do hire him, maybe what sort of hires he makes around him to potentially rebuild that Detroit Lions team that definitely needs a pretty hefty rebuild. So stick with us on First Bite. We'll be right back with Joe Goodberry. Okay, let's talk to our Twitch chat and our YouTube chat really quick. They're going off about Deshaun Watson because apparently Ian Rappaport dropped a tweet that said Deshaun Watson is extremely unhappy with the organization after owner Cal McNair.
As he should be.
He would be involved in the GM and coach hiring process, but then did neither.
I don't want to swear too much because I feel like as soon as we stop the recorder, I just go back to my usual Catholic self. But what a shit show the Texans
it sucks
have been.
That so many organizations get away with being so poorly run.
Right? So far, the takeaway in the chat, by the way, has been like, oh my God, I thought the Lions were run poorly.
I think people forget how bad the Bengals were in the 90s. I think people really forget, but that's a credit again to Marvin Lewis, is that it's like, hey, yeah, this team is always there in a tough division and they're making the playoffs, but they can't win a playoff game. But that's still leagues away from, again, what was it, 13 years without a winning record?
Yeah.
It's funny because I do a here I go name dropping it. I do a Sunday show with Andy Furman, who used to be on Cincinnati radio, and I remember he's one of those old man types who will share with you a bunch of newspaper clippings. So he sent me one to my work, and it took me a year before someone brought it down from my mailbox and gave it to me. But he clipped, and he basically, because I guess Furman wrote a kind of a column reminiscing on the obituary of Sam Weishi. And I guess because Weish, this just kind of showed the relation they had there, is that there was I forget the name of the play, but it was basically expletive Furman was actually something in the playbook. He was just mad as hell at Andy Furman on it. But that's just again, but because Furman was on that radio every day in the 90s ripping his ass because they couldn't, because they were wasting, what was, the end of a Super Bowl run.
Yeah. Yeah, there should have been a few more good years in the early 90s, but they completely lost it all in that transition from Paul to Mike.
Yeah, it's just
rough.
Yeah, it's brutal, man. Like, NFL's cruel like that. Like, I mean, all sports are cruel like that. Like, I don't know if the Warriors are going to come back. We're going to see a run like that again in the NBA. Like, and I know
that is the cruel part, right? That you realize, and you guys probably realize it too. Like, if you're getting to the end of the Matt Stafford era, as you go, man, that went by so fast.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like it's going to be forever when it starts. And now we're sitting here, AJ Green's, jogging off the field for the last time, in a Bengals uniform, and I'm just like, did we mess him up? Should he have been a Hall of Famer? Because he's not going to make it now, but like he should have been. He was fantastic.
Yeah.
There was nothing holding him back as a person.
He was
tremendous.
And Calvin Johnson,
and
like 1A, 1B for the longest time.
And I didn't want to put this on the podcast because I don't think it's too relevant to what we're talking about. Because obviously, I'm sure a lot of it was on offensive coordinators. But you saw what we can dunk on the end of Andy Dalton, but to get that kind of talent out of him early on was pretty damn good. Yeah, I mean, it's going to guarantee Andy Dalton's going to be a journeyman for the rest of his career in the NFL.
It's why Jay Gruden and Hugh Jackson got jobs.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone said, here's a second-round guy that's physically limited. You've got him to perform at an MVP level in 2015. You got him to have, 4,000 yards, 33 touchdowns, I want to say, in year 3, 2013. Mm-hmm. Like, people looked at that and said, okay, Jay Gruden, you're hired. And then he did it again with Hugh Jackson. They said, you're hired. And those guys went to bad organizations, and it didn't work. Who knows if it would have worked elsewhere? I assume not. But, that's just how it goes.
Right. But there's something to be said about making the guys around you look good.
Yeah.
Henry's got the game. Thank you for the follow. And I think I missed during our last podcast, Music Jacob. If you're still here, thank you for the follow as well. Appreciate it. You guys want to jump into the second segment? Get this knocked out?
Yeah, real quick. Do you mind? I want to take this one question from Twitch. I don't think unless you think it's good enough to go on the podcast. Let me read it first, then you decide. RL Ryden and Twitch asking us, would Marvin Lewis take a lesser job in the NFL, like defensive coordinator or assistant head coach? And I mean, for me, I'll kick it to Joe, but I think for me, like, again, from what you were saying, Joe, it feels like at his age, like, he's not really looking for kind of those mid-level jobs again. It's either he's going to retire or probably go on one last run through it.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Yeah. That does make sense. Although, man, I was going to say maybe assistant head coach. Or I mean, something like with like a light workload, maybe, where he's just like...
Yeah, or maybe like one of those
things.
Do you remember when Jim Caldwell had that like whole room of basically college football coaches who got fired, and he would just put like Randy Edsall and Al Golden, he was just putting them on like positional coachings or special. Randy Edsall was like special projects or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, God,
after he got fired from Maryland.
I was going to say Marvin did have a succession plan with Mike Brown and Hugh Jackson the final few years. I want to say it was, my memory's now, when did Hugh Jackson leave? It had to be 2016 was Jackson's last year.
Yeah, I think because that he went to the, Yeah.
So it was, if Hugh would have accepted, he would have stayed on as offensive coordinator. And there's always been speculation that Marvin will be able to transition into a GM role, and they would just kind of keep that core together, keep those guys together, and just kind of move it in that direction. But Hugh turned it down. So that was why Marvin ended up staying for 2016 and 17 and 18, even though they kind of weren't willing to do that. That wasn't the plan. It's just that Hugh took the job in Cleveland. So it's kind of, I do wonder what that would have looked like. Seeing Hugh Jackson go 0-16 and then 1-31, whatever it was. I mean, that pretty much spells it out for you. But I do wonder what would have happened with Marvin in a different role.
Yeah.
So there is something to that. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, let's rebound on it near the end of the podcast, Jeremy, because I am seeing some people saying they do want to see that in the podcast, just in case. Like, would he be open to joining potentially the future Lions staff as a defensive coordinator? Pretty much. Yeah.
Seems like a pipe dream. Seems like Lions fans just like, hey, I want him inside the building, but I don't want him at the top.
Yeah, it feels like people. It feels like people got to realize these are careers going on here. It's not like you kick a guy a job and he's just desperate enough for it, so he just grabs for it.
Can we draft coaches?
That's, you know what?
What was the one league where they were talking about trading a coach? Or did someone trade a coach?
It's happened in the
NBA?
NFL, has it not?
I thought it. Yeah, who was it in the NFL?
John Gruden.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
They won a Super Bowl. Here's your 2 first-round picks.
It works. It works.
Jesus
The
Christ.
process works.
What a stupid league sometimes.
All right, you guys ready to get back into it?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. And we are back with First Bite. We're with Joe Goodberry here talking about Marvin Lewis, the Lions' first head coaching candidate that was interviewed about a week ago. Let's get into what kind of team he would build in Detroit. Obviously, he comes from a defensive-minded background. In terms of, overall like coaching philosophy about what he thinks about the game of football, how you win football games, how would you describe Marvin Lewis? Is it something that, he has a very specific thing in mind, or has it evolved over time? Is he capable of, living in a world where passing reigns supreme, or is he just kind of like the old school, stop the run the ball kind of guy?
I don't think he's entirely old school, but there has been comments in the past of we want to win in the fourth quarter on the last drive type thing. And, that was always icky to me. Like, no, don't do that. No, your team's not good enough to do that. It's just not won that way anymore. But at the same time, he only had 3 offensive coordinators that whole time there until the final couple years. It was Bob Bratkowski and Carson Palmer and Chad Johnson, TJ Husmanzada, and they were throwing the ball all over the place. And they were a 3 wide receiver team. And that was really the Colts and the Bengals. I felt like doing it at the time where everyone was still a little bit transitioning into what we see this offense in the league look like now. So they were forefront there and at least copied the best offenses in the league at the very least, which was the Colts and Peyton Manning, to the point of when it became necessary to be a running team or hide the offensive line or, take advantage of where they spent a lot of resources, they would gear it that way. But then when it went to Jay Gruden, he allowed Jay Gruden to bring a lot of that stuff from, a lot of weird stuff, a lot of West Coast stuff too, that they didn't run before. And a lot of, especially with Hugh Jackson, I mean, they were running things with 2 offensive linemen out, split out wide, and just 3 offensive linemen under center or in the middle of the field. And they would get creative. They threw a ball back to Andy Dalton. He caught and ran for a touchdown. And everyone's like, whoa, this isn't Marvin Lewis, is it? But he allowed his coordinators to put their imprint on the offense, especially. And he allowed Mike Zimmer to run his defense. Mike Zimmer, you see a lot of double A gap looks, sugar in the A gap, as they'll call it. That Mike Zimmer made that trend around the league. And he did that in Cincinnati and showing 2 linebackers up there and making the offensive line cover for 6 guys, block 6 guys when only 4 are coming. And that gives you a lot of advantages. So there are a lot of things he has set and started, or at least embraced, even if you don't want to say he started those trends in the NFL, he at least embraced them and said, guys, if it works, we're going to do it. So he's not completely old school in that way that he wants to ground and pound, win with defense, because there were a lot of times he did not have a good defense and had to rely on the offense.
He has definitely built himself a coaching tree that you can find around the NFL. Obviously, I think some of those branches have been cut already, but as you said, Jay Gruden, and you brought up Mike Zimmer too, like just guys who kind of came through Cincinnati and went on to become head coaches. So do you know what kind of connections he would even have right now if he was to become a head coach? Like, he would definitely probably have connects across the NFL on who he would want to bring in for his coordinators.
He always did. And it seemed like it would always be someone you didn't expect, or at the same time, it could be someone you did. I mean, Hugh Jackson was wide receivers coach with the Bengals in 2005 when they went to the playoffs. Then he left, was a quarterbacks coach for the Ravens, got the head coaching job with the Raiders. And that's where the Carson Palmer trade went down. And then when he was fired from the Raiders, they brought him back as running backs and I want to say secondary coach. Or wait, first it was secondary coach, and then it was offensive coordinator. And then after he got fired from Cleveland, it was running backs coach. So he will bring guys back constantly. And we would get tired of it, to be honest with you. I mean, he signed Andre Smith maybe 6 times after letting him go off his rookie deal. And it was like, all right, enough of that. You got to know someone else out there, don't you, that can play right tackle? And that could be the Bengals' limitations, having the smallest scouting department in the league, right? So we never knew, but he under Marvin Lewis, they always brought back guys, whether it was coaches and players. It made me believe it was him. That was the thing also, and I don't know if how that question would come up, but he relied on veterans much more than rookies. We'd go through a whole rookie year like, why didn't you play that guy? What? I mean, that's a second-round pick that's got to play at some point. And guy got 80 snaps all year and ended up being good in year 2. It's like, come on, Marvin, you gotta trust these guys a little bit. So I think he trusts what he knows. So what's that mean? I mean, Paul Gunther just got fired in Oakland as the defensive coordinator. He was a young guy that got hired as like a consultant or like a specialist, one of those low-end defensive jobs, ended up being a linebacker assistant, then the linebacker coach, then defensive coordinator. He brought Leslie Frazier as a guy that's now the Bills defensive coordinator. He had Leslie Frazier back in the 2000s as the Bengals defensive coordinator. He's had connections, had guys that have run through the league. Jay Gruden, obviously, we've mentioned already before. So Bill Lazor, another one that has been with him. Alex Van Pelt, another. I mean, he's had these guys under him that have had a lot of experience in the league. I think he would easily. It's really, from a Bengals perspective, the biggest issue we've had with Zach Taylor is he could not fill out a staff. Like, it's weird. You interview a guy, right? And one of the questions that I've been told you ask is, okay, so who would you bring with you? Right. And they usually are ready to say, okay, I got this guy, I can bring this guy, and that's our staff, and it looks good. And you're not just hiring that guy, you're hiring the staff he's going to build. Right. I don't know what happened in Cincinnati when they interviewed Zach Taylor, but he couldn't hire a defensive coordinator when he got out there. Like 3 people turned down the job, didn't even want to interview. Another guy said, nah, never mind, I'll just go back and coach college. 2 guys, actually, Ohio State and Florida. And then they end up with some guy who is now they're keeping for the 3rd straight year because I don't think they can find another defensive coordinator. So that has been a big change. And one of the biggest criticisms we've had of going from Marvin to Zach Taylor is, man, it was never a problem to fill out a staff with Marvin. He always had good guys underneath him. And now it's a big difference.
Yeah. And that might, be of big importance for the Lions. They keep talking about how they want someone with experience either at that GM or coaching level, and so a guy with a lot of connections will not only bring a head coach with a lot of experience, but probably bring an entire staff full of a lot of experience. So I think that'll rank highly on the Lions' wish list. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, because I've talked to some fans over the past few weeks, and it is funny a little bit to me that I've had some guys saying, like, why are all these names coming out that are coordinators to be first-time head coaches? I want a guy with experience, and I want a guy who can just take us to the next level. And I just have to tell people, like, this is the territory you're going to be looking at here. Like, I don't know. I don't, and I would just say to those fans too, is like, because again, as I opened up, and I hate to bag on a bit, but the perception of Marvin Lewis would have been someone who is not a winner, but a loser. And because probably he lost those playoff games, and because he feels like a retread. But I have to let people know, it's like, this is the kind of stuff you're looking for if you want a guy with experience. There's not going to be a guy who's like currently killing it in some other team who's just going to up and pack up everything to come to the Lions. You're going to have to take a risk on some of these guys.
I mean, the only one of those people are you're picking from maybe college, and then a lot of those college guys, they don't even want to leave their jobs.
College
they're,
ranks,
they're very comfy over there.
Yeah. I'm going to stop myself, because before we get Twitch chat mad at me again.
I was going to say, though, it happened one time. Andy Reid was really like the only guy who was let go. And it was like, yeah, your team should probably hire him.
Right.
And even then, I remember people saying Andy, like, not a lot of people put a lot of faith in Andy Reid, just because the perception of the Eagles at the end of the Andy Reid era was just, they're going nowhere.
Right. That they couldn't get it done. Right. That was the idea.
Right.
That they could get there, but we don't think Andy Reid could get it done for whatever reason. They had good defenses. His offense not good enough. And then you got like a Chiefs. If you look at the Chiefs record before Andy Reid too, it was just okay.
Oh man, wow.
Largely bad. And so I don't think Marvin is Andy Reid, because I don't think he's going to bring a system that I know will work. Right. That's kind of the thing I look for too. If you guys are going through this right now, it's like, all right, is this defense coordinator going to bring this system? Is this offensive guy going to bring his system? Because those are tangible things we can look at from the outside and say, I want that. But really, we have no idea once they get in here. Right. How many times you hire a guy that's like, oh, he's ran the defense in New England. He should be able to run that here. And then the defense sucks. And so what do you do?
Sounds familiar. I got 2 very quick questions about how things ran in Cincy. And the first one is very petty, and it's just something that I get caught up in every single game. How is he as a game day manager in terms of like timeout usage, aggressive fourth down, that sort of thing? Those are the things that drive me crazy on game day, and the things I can very easily point to as failures in coaching. So how does he pass in his time in Cincy?
Half of my articles were about the Bengals not being aggressive enough and not doing the right thing. They would punt at the 40-yard line in a game that's 13-16, and I'm like, what are you doing? There's not enough time. You're not going to get the ball back. You don't punt to Pat Mahomes. Not that they ever did, but that's the idea. You can't do it.
Right.
Horrible. If there's one thing that the Bengals upgraded, even getting a way worse record under Zach Taylor so far, is that the Bengals do the right thing on fourth down now. They do the right thing in terms of aggressiveness, when not to kick field goals. Never kick field goals ever again, please. If you honestly have a good offense, field goals are wins for the defense, in my opinion. If I could never punt again, if my team was like, oh, we're not going to punt it unless we're down in our own 30, and I'd be like, great, let's go forward with it. Well, Marvin Lewis will punt and he will kick field goals, and I'm just not down with that stuff.
Fair enough. And then my other one, I do want to talk about the culture that seemed to have grown in Cincy in terms of the reputation of their players.
I wanted to get on this too. Yeah,
it definitely seems like at some point, maybe it's just the individual players. Maybe these were the kind of people that Marvin Lewis was targeting or whatever. But obviously, aggressive on the field, penalties on the field, some issues off the field with guys like Vontaze Burfict, obviously the one that comes to mind first. Was this something that was Marvin Lewis's fault? Is this something that Marvin Lewis would even consider a fault and maybe even a strength? What happened there?
And it wasn't just 2015's roster either that had that meltdown in an epic way. It was, remember the 2000s, they were like the team that was always getting arrested.
Yeah.
And they always had guys that was like, oh, there's another Bengal player arrested. And it was embarrassing. But
yeah, I was actually on the radio on a morning show. And I believe when TJ Hushmanzada shared a story about bailing an unnamed Bengal out of jail at 7 a.m, and then they went and played a football game.
Yeah, you hear a lot of stories that are just, what? Like, no wonder you guys didn't win anything. Marvin Lewis Chad Johnson had Hugh Jackson in a headlock in the halftime of the 2005 playoff game. And yeah, no wonder you didn't win. I mean, there's a lot of weird stories and a lot of stuff you could probably hear that just go, oh my God, no wonder players want it out. No, but here's the thing, okay? And you don't excuse that, because I have two different ideas I look at this. Number one is they had a tough time acquiring talent, right? So they had to go get, hey, Pac-Man Jones, you've been in the league for 2 years. Here's a 1-year cheap deal. We could really use a corner, and it worked out. Pac-Man was good for them. It boiled over and didn't work in 2015 as he tries to push Joey Porter, who Joey Porter, by the way, punched left tackle Levi Jones in a casino in Vegas, come up behind him and sucker punched him. So he had that coming for a long time. Screw Joey Porter completely. And so when you have to sign these guys because they're cheap and because your roster is lacking and you know it, and you go out and you're doing whatever it takes to get it over the hump, I can respect that. I think the other part is when you play the Steelers, right? I don't know who this is for you guys. I don't know if you guys have this in Detroit, but fuck the Steelers completely. And I don't know if I can swear on here, but we hate the Steelers completely.
Go ahead.
Because they're bullies and they never get called for it. And they're tough, they're strong, they're fast, they're good. But they push a little too hard. They go a little too far. They hit a little too much. They cry for the flag. They cry to the refs, and they get the call. They're like the bully that hits you, you hit them back, and then the principal says, hey, you're in trouble because they caught you and not the bully. And the Bengals did that. They matched their intensity in 2015. They said, because Ryan Shazier knocked out Giovanni Bernard in the first quarter with a headshot, no penalty.
Yep.
Their safety, Mike Mitchell, lays out Tyler Eifert, no penalty, right? Bengals said, all right, we're taking over. We're going to get physical. We're going to hit them back. We're going to play their game. Well, when you don't do it every week, you don't know how to control it. And they let it boil over. And they let the Steelers poke them until the point where they just gave the game away on that last drive. And so you go, okay, you tried.
Yeah, it's like three things. I started with 2 things, and then I started putting up a third finger. One, on that game, like, I'm sorry, that's on the refs, because, like, when you let stuff like that go early on, what happens is guys realize they're not going to get called, or the refs aren't going to step in to control it. So it's just going to become headhunting at that point. 2, I mean, that's just, I might as well go and say it as far as the team we have for the Lions. Like, I'll just go ahead and say it. The writing's on the wall. It's the damn Packers.
Yeah,
I don't know if they get physical like that, but as far as
everyone
not
in
getting
chat
called,
is saying Packers, fuck the
Packers. Yeah. Believe the Packers. 3. I have a theory about this too when it came to the Bengals, because I feel like that's just the state of the AFC North, because not the Bengals were included in this. The Bengals, the Ravens, and the Steelers, they have all had coaching staffs that have been there for a very long time. Unlike the rest of the NFL, not a lot of turnover with who is actually on their staff. And that's honestly how rivalry, because guys are getting flipped all the time in the NFL now. Rivalry isn't being passed between players. It's being passed between coaches now a little bit. And when you have 3 teams with long-standing staffs, like, I mean, we just saw it this year, Jeremy, Joe, like this thing where like the Bengals and the Ravens are mad at the Bengals because they kicked a field goal and broke a shutout. Like those are the kind of tempers that are happening in the AFC North. It's if it looks dirty, then by God, it's not just the Bengals there. All 3 of those teams are guilty.
And you look at the division from like 2010, this last decade, if you want, there are no Browns divisions and championships in there, but they've been the Browns. But man, it's been split between the Bengals, Ravens, and Steelers. Like, you'd be surprised how often those teams are making the playoffs. 2 of them, 3 of them at times. And it's like, they're fighting for each other, or fighting against each other, not only through the regular season, but they've played each other too much in the playoffs, man. Now you play the Steelers twice, 05, 2015, and lose the way you do. But the Ravens and Steelers have had playoff games. I mean, it is just bad blood in that division. And, well, the Browns made it this year to the playoffs. Good for them. I'm actually kind of happy for them. But
the monkey's paw kind of curling a little bit right now, I have to say.
But even 3 weeks ago, the Bengals on Monday night, they beat the Steelers with Ryan Finley in there. And it's like, screw draft position. Penny Sewell, beat them, do it, go all the way, crush them. And, they did. So that was fun.
All right, wrapping up here. I do have a couple more questions for you. One comes from our Twitch chat. RL Raiden asks, would Marvin Lewis like to take a lesser job like a defensive coordinator or assistant head coach position? Is that something you see him potentially doing, even though he's kind of this late in his career?
I don't think he would. I think he would want the head coaching job or nothing, or he'd just be cool with retiring or, being an assistant somewhere close to home. But I talked with you guys a little bit about a succession plan he had with Hugh Jackson. If Hugh Jackson would take over or follow Marvin from 2015 and the transition to 2017 range, and Hugh Jackson ended up taking the job in Cleveland. So I do wonder if whatever staff he built, if he's like, okay, this is like a 3-year thing, maybe, or 4 years, and I'm going to have these guys ready below me to take over, because he could have stepped down at any time and it would have been Mike Zimmer, Hugh Jackson, or Jay Gruden taking over the Bengals, and he just outlasted them, not on purpose, but because Hugh Jackson didn't want to accept the plan. So I wonder if there would be some type of, all right, I'm going to take the head coaching job, but this guy here is a future head coach. He's going to be my offensive coordinator, and I'm going to groom him into that role for 3 years down the line.
And then my last question, and I think this has kind of been lingering over the entire podcast, because a lot of things that you've been mentioning seems to remind a lot of Lions fans of a certain person. So I'm taking this question from our own Ryan Matthews. He wanted me to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rank Marvin Lewis? I'm sorry, a scale to 1 to Jim Caldwell, what would you rate Marvin Lewis?
He's definitely Jim Caldwell completely. And, I kind of wonder how you guys feel about that. Like, looking back of, should we have just stuck with Jim Caldwell? Would he have been all right? Could we have built a better team around it, or, better staff with him? And there's some of those same questions with Bengals fans and Marvin. There's still a lot of Marvin defenders in Bengals fans that say, yeah, I'd rather be 8-8 than 3-13. And there's some truth to that. But I think at the end of the day, what's the ultimate goal, right? We'd all love to just go to the playoffs again and enjoy a playoff victory. But you eat that same food every day, you start to go, I'm ready for the next one. I'm ready for whatever that is. I'm ready for change. And the Bengals were at that point of, all right, we've been in the playoffs. We've been getting embarrassed on the playoffs. We've been getting embarrassed in prime time. What is the goal here? What are we actually trying to do? Let's be honest. And the honesty is, you want to win a Super Bowl. This guy can take your poorly run franchise to that ultimate goal. And we had to come to the conclusion of, no, he cannot do it. We're going to have to find a special guy. And if that means some bad seasons in between, well, then so be it.
Yeah, it's the old Talladega Nights line that I've been falling in love with recently. It's if you ain't first, you're last.
That's right.
Fans just feel that way.
Yeah.
And, that's really the point I want to – you have to decide, is just making the playoffs or just being competitive good enough for you? I know when you're starving, a cracker tastes great, right? But
oh, yeah. How many Lions fans do we have? It's like just one playoff win. I just want one playoff win in my life. Let me tell you, once you have that first playoff win, you're going to be hungry for a lot more.
Went to the playoffs 5 straight years, 6 out of 7 years. And now they didn't win one, but it was not enough. I mean, the standards got so high so quickly of, all right, he's not good enough to do it. We gotta let Andy Dalton go. We gotta let Marvin Lewis go. We gotta figure this out. I'll tank a whole year, get a quarterback. Let's get back there. It wasn't that simple, obviously, but I feel much closer to the Super Bowl now than I did even with some of those Marvin years, because you get the right quarterback and you feel like you have a chance in this league if you can hit the right coach. Yeah. And the Bengals may not have, but I also don't think Marvin is that guy either.
Fair enough. And I think Lions fans can certainly relate, because, I mean, everyone was on the Fire Caldwell wagon. Almost everyone was on the Fire Caldwell after back-to-back 9-7 seasons.
Not me.
Not you. And I was hoping for another year. But regardless, we had gotten to a point, not even 10 years in the rear view where this team was 0-16 and suddenly 9-7 wasn't good enough. So I think you're right. And I think
literal words from upper management that 9-7 wasn't good enough.
Yeah. And so, I think that's why a lot of people are looking at this interview as something like it's not something to get that excited about, because we just got rid, of Jim Caldwell not that long ago. And granted, we know what's on the other side sometimes, and taking a risk
now
might result in Matt Patricia.
And now we are 2 years later in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor, and we still don't know what he is. It's weird because they've had such a weird 2 years now. But, chances are he's not going to pull this around, right? You don't win 6 games in 2 years and then pull it out. So you already got the conversation of, all right, well, who's the next coach? And people are like, well, I'll take Mike Zimmer. And I'm like, man, would you? I mean, is that where you want to be? Do you want to just get back to the playoffs? Within 2 years now, the bar has been lowered right back down. You raise it quick, you lower it very quickly, and you'll accept anything.
By the way, enjoy this entire offseason of people pointing to Kyle Shanahan as the evidence that someone can turn their coaching career around in the third year, because we just went through that last year. So much fun. You're going to love it. That's Joe Goodberry. Thanks for joining us. Joe, where can the people find you if they want to hear more from you?
Check me out on Twitter. I don't just talk Bengals, especially draft season. I will talk a lot of things, football and NFL draft, player evaluation at Joe Goodberry, just how it sounds. Or if you do like comic books, movies, or just weird stuff that I like to make, that's a good conversation there too.
Yeah, Arif told us you are handy with a 3D printer, which sounds
cool. I'm 3D printing some Mandalorian armor right now, actually.
Dang, so maybe if y'all got some requests and some money, hit up Joe Goodberry at Joe Goodberry on Twitter. Joe, thanks for all the information. Really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
And I appreciate you guys listening. Be sure to listen to our full-blown podcast, which is probably coming either Monday night or Sunday night. We're still working those out. But until then, it's chaos. Be kind. All right. Recorder is off. We're still live technically, because we like to do some Afterglow stuff. But if you have to go, Joe, please, you're free to go.
I'm good, but I am gonna start cleaning up and packing up here in a minute. But thanks, guys. That was awesome.
Thanks a lot, Joe. This was great.
You guys are easy to talk to, so you're running a good show there.
Hey, I appreciate you saying that, Joe. And,
I know it's not always.
You lived up to their Reef hype as well, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to fuck it. You don't want to ever disappoint a Reef. He'll come at you if that happens.
Reef's a good guy, actually. He just can't drive.
Ooh, I'll have to bring that up next time I talk to him.
We're pulling into the stadium at Mobile and for the Senior Bowl, and I'm like, I'm not with the Reef, but I'm behind this car, and I'm going, what the hell's going on? This guy half in the median, half out of it. Like, go get in the median, turn your blinker on, turn. And he's like, kind of just drifting off. Like, is this where I turn? It's not. And I'm like, dude, you're gonna cause an accident or something. And it's funny. We pull in, and I pull right behind him, get in a parking spot. This little 5'2" guy comes out, and it's a Reef, and I'm like, oh, Reef. Jesus, can you see over the steering wheel? What's the problem here? And I'm just giving him stuff, and he's like, what? And he's good. He's a good sport. He's a lot of fun.
He is. We love having him on. We've probably had him on 3 times or 4 times just this season because he's so much fun and obviously a really smart dude as well.
He is, for sure. But all right, guys,
All right, Joe.
Thank you for having me on. Anytime you need me, just reach out for me.
Appreciate it. We'll do that.
All right. Take care, guys.
You too. That's Joe
boy.
Goodberry, everybody. That was a lot of fun.
That was very fun. Especially, I love going through history of some other teams like that too. I know we probably talked too much on the past and not enough on the what if, but you start getting down those lines. Like the Bengals, the 2000s Bengals are a very fun story just because it's such like anytime you have guys like Ocho Cinco and Pac-Man Jones and TJ Hushmanzada and all those guys in that locker room, it's you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, he was fast. That conversation was fascinating because I guess I never really knew the depths of the dysfunction there in Cincy, and it made me at least. I mean, I don't think Marvin Lewis is the guy. I think maybe that was kind of a field some information kind of interview, but at the same time, like he made me at least a little bit hopeful that it was just like if the Lions can get out of their own way with a guy like Marvin Lewis, like maybe it could actually work. Because the Bengals are a mess, and
it's funny if the Lions do hire Marvin Jones, I might have to go get I mentioned him, I think in our pre-meeting, but Andy Furman, I might have to go get him because he'll be more of a firecracker on this thing. Andy loves throwing spitballs, but no, it's funny because as you say, like that's like the first thing you lead with, and that's the only thing you remember is God. Watching them just blow it year after year in the playoffs. And it was always in a back-breaking fashion too, right? Like there were those 4 years between 12 and 15 where it's like double-digit wins every time. And we're looking at this team and thinking they've got a real shot to go deep, and they just get in there and start eating pay dirt, man.
Yeah.
Like just eating the floor.
It's and that's kind of like, I don't know, playoff record is such a flimsy stat to me. It feels like sometimes just because it's just
I mean, listen, it's random. It's random.
Yeah, it feels you when you've got two really good teams facing off against each other, it does feel like a flip of the coin, and it sucks when it comes up heads every single time that you call tails. But I feel like that may have been what happened in Cincy, at least a little bit. But when he started talking a little bit about the primetime games, they couldn't win the primetime games. They couldn't beat like the one division.
No, this feels like the Caldwell. This feels like the Caldwell record all over again, where it's like, how everyone, because of those years, people keep bringing up, Stafford's record against winning teams to talk about him as a quarterback, but that kind of that also gets reflected onto the coaching staff all the time. Right. So, I mean, and it is funny. We are doing this like not a day or two removed. Speaking of old Lions coaching staffs, where I see Jim Schwartz contemplating retirement.
Oh, he announced today he did.
Oh, he did. He did announce today. Okay,
he announced
sorry.
today, just like 2 hours ago that he's
I
stepping down.
apologize with what I apologize that I'm not up on the latest. This isn't me being adequate, but I apologize on me not being up on the latest NFL news, considering no other big news is happening in this country, in the United States of America right now that would ever distract me from reading up about the National Football League.
Some quick questions.
Not adhering to the shield.
Some quick questions here from the chat. Loaded Air says, "Are you guys doing GM/head coach profile podcasts on guys that the Lions are interviewing or planning to interview? Because I'd really like to hear about Arthur Smith and Ed Dodds, even though it seems like we won't interview them." The answer is yes. We're only kind of doing the candidates because this could all be over in a week. And we've basically been doing one a week. I want to do maybe 2 weeks from now until we get a hire.
We're gonna have two coming out this week here, because you just recorded the Arif Hassan interview earlier. Like, listen, this could be over. Like, the whole reason we're saying, hey, we might move to Monday for the POD cast recording is like they might announce something on Monday. We don't want to record on a Sunday.
Twitter is all a kerfuffle right now of some baker in San Francisco that's convinced that the Lions are hiring Robert Saleh. Like, this could.
I'm sorry. I thought they were holding on to Darrell Bevel. That's the rumor.
There's two rumors that hit the Lions verse today, and because everyone on Twitter
I think you spend too much
the
reading
hell out of it.
This is why I don't follow. Like, I know I have a lot of Lions fans following me, but this is also why I don't follow a lot of you people back. Like, it's to keep myself pure, because Jeremy is mad about these random takes, these random, hey, I have a source tweets. and I don't even see them, so I can't get mad. I'm in Nirvana.
Well, no, I normally wouldn't see them, but people tag Pride of Detroit. They're like, oh, did you see random dude?
I know,
like,
I know, but that's why I don't follow a Lions fans, because they end up retweeting it or quote tweeting it to be snarky, and then I have to see it.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say
I'm inoculating myself.
Anyways, don't believe any of that stuff. I get like, but I mean, the one reality we can say is like, if Salah's their guy, that dude is scheduled to interview in two other places. Like, you might want to lock it down sooner rather than later. Like, it's very realistic, I would say, for the Lions potentially to have a head coach by the beginning of next week. Yeah, maybe even like, by the end of this week. Like, it could.
It's a frenzy right now.
Yeah,
it's absolutely a frenzy. We don't even know if anyone else will get fired from the playoff teams. I can't imagine any of them will.
I mean, the only Matt Nagy is maybe the only possible candidate, and it seems like that's not going to happen either.
Sean Payton could retire.
True,
as far as we know. Like, depending what happens, how far they go in the playoffs, he might just be like, all right, I'm done, because Drew Brees is also done.
Oh, hold on. Breaking news from our Twitch chat. Quaslow says his uncle works at Nintendo, and he says we're hiring Scarlett Johansson. So,
yeah, my girlfriend from Canada.
But yeah.
Oh my God.
So to answer your original question, we are just gonna focus on the guys that are candidates. And so, I mean, we're almost kind of near the end of the list at this point, because we've really done some due diligence. And if you haven't,
I do want to ask on Saleh though, like, because I've been thinking about this, because you are seeing the NFL swinging the way of offensive coordinators, and here we are hung up on a defensive guy. Like, how much of it is the Dearborn story for him, do you think? Because even when I've been on air, like, the whole reason I feel like I'm touting it half the time is like, yeah, he's from Dearborn.
I think that's part of the reason why Lions fans are attracted to him, but you have to realize this guy's now been requested for 5 out of the 6 openings.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Browns job could have been his last year, and he ended up turning it down to go back to San Francisco. And like, you don't turn down a head coaching job twice.
Right.
In the NFL.
So no, I mean, I think he's a legit candidate. I mean, we talked with Mike Mayoko, and if you haven't listened to that podcast, it's a great one. He made the argument that he's been better this year than he was last year, and last year they had a top 2 defense. And you always have to remember, like, this is a defensive coordinator for an offensive-minded head coach too. So that's his defense. Like, he's not getting help. That's him. And everything
I've heard about Saleh too is like, he's kind of the one handling the day-by-day stuff, while Shanahan's just kind of like back in the lab brewing everything up.
Yeah.
Like, he handles, and that's what you want in your head coach, is like, you're not going to be just a coordinator as a head coach. You need to know how to handle a lot more than just that.
Yeah. And that's what the Lions specifically said. That's what Rod Wood, it's one of the most interesting things Rod Wood said this week, is that I think in the past we overvalued accomplishments when we were talking about general managers and head coaches, because a lot of their job is management. A lot of their job is making sure everything's running smoothly, communicating with their higher ups, communicating with their team, developing relationships. And I mean, it's pretty easy to read between the lines there, right? Like, they fucked up with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. Those guys had resumes, sure, but they did not have the interpersonal skills that this team is currently trying to value.
Yeah, and like, listen, like, you talk about the difference between, it's funny enough because I was just talking with someone about the difference between college coaches succeeding at the NFL on who is succeeding, because Urban Meyer's name is coming up. This is why I was talking with him about it. And I've seen Urban Meyer's name floating around a lot of people, and I don't think Urban Meyer would be a great NFL coach by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I know I've seen some people, including some Detroit Lions people, talk about how he'd be a good hire, but like, I don't know. I see Urban Meyer as kind of the recruiter. He's not someone like, you look at the college coaches who have done well in the NFL, right? Jimmy Johnson and Pete Carroll. Those are 1 and 1-2, 1 and 1A, I would say. I don't know if there's any other prime examples up there, but there's a lot more bad examples like Nick Saban or Steve Spurrier. But you got Pete Carroll, who won at USC and then won with Seattle. You had Jimmy Johnson, who won at Miami and won with the Cowboys. And the commonality on both those guys is that they know how to manage a lot of different personality types. Like, and sometimes that leaves them pretty weird. Like, you got pictures of, hurricanes during those like really rough and tumble 80s years where they're just hugging Jimmy Johnson so much, they love him so much, and he goes on to Dallas and manages that cast of just insane misfits that was running roughshod in Dallas at the time.
Right.
You look at Pete Carroll, who, I heard stories that he would go work out. He would go into Compton at like 4 a.m. and just go and lift weights with guys just because he wanted them to come to USC.
Right.
And then to go from there to Seattle, and it's not been peaches and cream in Seattle, mind you, but he's had quite a difficult locker room to work with in Seattle.
Sure.
So, I mean, but that's a skill those guys have, is that they work with those personality types, not as a dictator, but as just someone who realizes that every person is different and needs their own different set of gloves applied to them.
Josh Mercer asked about the Deshaun Watson stuff. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that at the top, or in our first break. Yeah, was that now or was that during our first podcast? They're both bleeding. Were you here when we were talking about the Deshaun Watson stuff?
I saw someone in our chat mention it, but I don't think we talked about it while we were live.
That must have been during the first podcast. Then yeah. Like Deshaun Watson. Well, no, it was during this break because we were
break.
Because we were talking about how horribly managed other teams are right now. The Texans look like they're a freaking mess. I think their general manager search was a joke. I think they got a talented guy in Nick Caserio. I think he's the guy that Lions thought they were getting in Bob Quinn, because this is a guy who truly has been the 1B to Bill Belichick in terms of player personnel. But they hired a search group who offered, I think, 5 candidates. None of them were Nick Caserio, and they ended up hiring Nick Caserio hours after they had finished an interview with someone else. I don't remember who it was, but like it's very clear to me that they had their mind set. And this was a guy they've tried to pursue a couple times and got denied by the Patriots in the past, but now the
big
that allowed them to get him.
The big thing for the media and for fans, they're looking at this is like, oh my God, you're going back to bite at the Patriots apple again,
right after Bill Belichick's grave, or Bill O'Brien's grave, is not even fully covered at this point. And you're just like,
yeah. And this was the year. This was not the year for, again, the Patriots coaching tree, because not only Bill O'Brien, but I mean, obviously Matt Patricia too. Like, you had 2 big name proteges from the Patriots tree just eat dirt, man. Yeah. And just for the Texans, that's a longer standing, like, pillaging of your team. Like, the Dolphins are going to have a top 5 pick in the draft because of I'm just making sure it's top 5. Yeah, it's the number 3 pick because of your man Bill O'Brien. Yeah. Like, holy crap.
I mean, again, like, here, the only reason for decades I've pushed back on the Lions ownership is crap. We need the Fords to sell the team. Is that they've never done shit like this. Like, yes, they've hired the wrong people. Yes, at times they've gone about things the wrong way. I think we can all look back to the process of hiring Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. They were woefully unprepared, and they didn't do their due diligence most of those times. But at the same time, like, it looked like they were trying. They go out and get a consultant that knows what he's doing, and he interviews Bob Quinn and says, wow, this is the best interview I've had. And it's just like, it looked like they were trying it and trying to do the best that they knew. Maybe they didn't know the best, but like the level of disorganization, the level of pissing off your franchise quarterback, saying you're going to be a part of the GM search, and then you don't include him. Like, it's never been that bad. It's never been that publicly bad. And I know, like, hey, they're trying isn't going to win a lot of Lions fans over, and it probably shouldn't, but the dysfunction I see in some other organizations, I have yet to see in the Lions organization.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is people are trying to do the sins of the father, or in this case, the sins of the husband sometimes, with William Clay Ford, who wasn't a meddling guy, but had the opposite problem in that he was maybe too out to lunch. when it came to the team.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's true or not. I would rather take
was.
that versus the opposite with meddling all the time.
Right.
But you also have to understand too, is like, I think fans, this is always grass is always greener on the other side going on right now. I hate to do that. I'm sorry, because it feels like I'm throwing water on the parade, water on the idea, and say it's not worth trying. And that's never a good place to be. The potential always has more impact to your mood than the kinetic. But the chances that there are such a thing as another Rooney family out there are slim to none. Those aren't who are buying NFL teams now. The guys who are buying NFL teams now are Dan Snyder. It's not even that, Jeremy. It's not even that. It's Dan Snyder, Shad Khan. It's not even the amount of money. It's literally that, though. They don't look at these things. They look at these teams differently.
Right.
An old NFL owner sees this as exactly what an NFL team should be, as a toy, to be bandied around, to have some prestige, maybe make a little bit of profit, but also you're spending money on it because you want to win. Whereas a lot of these guys coming in, it's the bottom line, man. The next owner is either going to be a private equity vampire, or they're going to have made their money like scamming grandmas on blockchain or something, and come in and just make weirdo decisions like Snyder or Khan.
Yeah.
And like, I don't want to bag on Khan too much, but because I think, there was that news. I'm bagging on Khan a little bit because there was that news that he's going to have final say on personnel decisions. But one of my friends, Bo Benson, producer at Fox Sports Radio, brought this up to me. He's like, maybe it's because he kind of dealt with the fact that Tom Coughlin was judge, jury, and executioner in Jacksonville, and he wants at least a little bit of say. So a dictator like Coughlin can't just run roughshod. But still, it's never a good look when your owner is the one who wants to have final say on personnel decisions, because you kind of imagine your owners as, they know their business maybe, but not the football decisions.
Right. Well, and it's one of the many things I should say that Chris Spielman said that I think made a ton of sense. He's like, good leadership is hiring smart people, not being intimidated by them, and letting them do their job. And your job as owner is to hire a good GM that knows what he's doing and let them do their job. And when they're not doing your job, that's when you step in and say, you know what, time to try someone else. That's it.
Or alternatively, you can be an owner, also be the general manager, shit talk about your coach nonstop and your quarterback nonstop, take every microphone that's in front of you, last forever because you made oil money since God knows when, keep resting on wins that you've had back 30 years ago, and yet for some reason you are now still the shadow the shadow commissioner of the NFL.
I wonder who you could be talking about. That's interesting.
Settle down a little bit.
Joshua asked, do you think Watson gets the trade he wants? I think no chance. I think we're in the moment right now. He's hot. He's probably really, really pissed off, but it's early. He won't even be able to be traded until the beginning of the new year. Not to say you can't.
He'll have a coach in by then, and hopefully that coach will then sit Watson down and tell him the plan. Maybe, but if Watson goes ahead with this and wants out, like, that's the last thing the Texans can allow, because if they let Watson like just flip out and demand a trade publicly, like, everyone else is going to bail. Yeah. Like, there's very few reasons to keep this team together, no matter what no matter how many glowing military speeches JJ Watt gives in front of a microphone. A lot of the Texans players are looking towards the exit doors.
I mean, it wasn't that long in the rearview mirror at this point where like people were pissed off at the owner for being racist. Like, there's not a lot of good things happening.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's the old owner though. He's dead. Right?
Oh, is that true? You might be.
Yeah. Bob McNair died. He died like 2 years ago. Yeah, but he was the one who did the inmates running the asylum comment. Yeah.
All right. I think I'm ready to close things up. I've been live, going on 3 hours now with the other podcast. So
you gotta get yourself some tea.
My dinner was a ham sandwich because I thought I was going to have more time in between podcasts, and I did not. So, I think I'm going to go eat some more, even though it's past my my fasting, or it's into my fasting time that I'm supposed to be here. But like I said, who was on the other podcast? Arif Hassan was there. We were talking about George Payton, the Vikings assistant general manager. Really interesting conversation. Not a candidate I was too excited about going in. Arif made him sound very interesting. And so that will be on the podcast feed tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah, I think we're going to drop that one first, and then God, I need to figure out when, because tomorrow's Friday already.
I think maybe drop it Saturday, since I think chances are, chat, we don't want to record the podcast during a playoff game, and so I think chances are good we're going to move that to Monday night, maybe for the foreseeable future.
By the way, for those playoff games though, since we've been pimping it so much, Discord. We all invite you to our Discord, our Pride of Detroit Discord.
Beat you to it. Boom.
Yeah, Jeremy, if you're on Twitch, you're watching us on Twitch, Jeremy just dropped the link in there.
I'll throw it on
I think maybe we'll pimp it again tomorrow on the feed, on the Twitter feed. So make sure to be at Pride of Detroit, following them on Twitter. Listen, we've been growing it. I think me and Jeremy, we were just talking about, we're going to be overhauling the channels here in the next couple of days. And during the season, we had live viewing parties. Unfortunately for me, I was like half asleep, so I wasn't talking as much during them. I was just there to be there for the games. But we had a lot of good fun. And it started with people just watching Thursday night football. So I think we're going to try to have watch parties. You know, it's COVID. You can't really go out to a sports bar or nothing. So join us on Discord. There's going to be a voice chat on there, but also on the Discord too. It's not just the voice chat. We have so many cool things going on in Discord. So many chats. It's basically like these chats live during Twitch and YouTube, but all the time. And I think we're good. You know, we have a news feed on there as well. There's a lot of cool stuff we're doing on the Discord. We want to grow it.
Yeah. And so this is Discord. In case you don't know, this is our Discord. Pride of Detroit here. Basically, it's like a chat room. We have a bunch of different chat rooms where here's where you come in. General, you can talk about whatever you want in our general Lions news. All of our stories get posted into our Lions news channel, and you can discuss them here. If you want to talk about any other sports, we got a video games channel, fantasy football site. And then these are what he was talking about. So there's voice channels. This is where sometimes we record the podcast.
We're actually in the staff room right now, but you can't see it because you're on a browser.
Yeah. And then you can see exclusive Zazu photos in here as well. But yeah, so during games, we jump into a voice channel. You can do a video and play a video. So someone, you know, don't tell the NFL. Sometimes we throw a feed of a football game, and we all just sit in a voice chat room and watch a game together and chat. Yeah. So that's what it is. ! Discord. You do. I think you have to download software on your computer.
Yes, you do. You have to download a client. You can get it on your phone too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a client. I think there is a web version of it, so you can just go to like discord.gg and join. I'm at discord.com, excuse me, not GG. And like, I think if you just put it in the browser, if you don't have it, there is a web version of Discord as well.
But I know
it's like if you ever use Slack for work or something like that, it's like that plus voice chat.
Yeah. I know there are a lot of people that in our Pride of Detroit community that aren't happy with the comment section and the changes they've made to the comment section. This is a nice quick alternative. Maybe the conversations aren't formatted in the exact same way, and they are making changes, thankfully, to the Pride of Detroit comment section. Thankfully, they've gotten rid of the read more of this conversation here button where it takes you into a new tab and all that shit. Like, that shit is done, and it was a horrible idea from the get-go. But yeah, this is it's like a little chat room. And
yeah, and I know a lot of our audience, you know, we do have a lot of audience people who already have Discord because they play, you know, if you're a gamer of any stripe, you probably already have Discord. If not, then you'll probably at some point run into Discord. And I've seen it used in a lot of other circles now besides just video games. And I mean, so it's another way for us to try to grow our community, because at the end of the day, we are writing about the Lions, we are podcasting about the Lions, but we're doing it because we want to have a community. That's been the whole point of podcast from the start too, is like,
and that's
I want to talk about you guys. Yeah.
That's been the special thing about Pride of Detroit from the beginning. It's what drew me to Pride of Detroit as just a commenter back then, because like I was living in California. I didn't have that connection to Lions fans that I did when I lived here originally. And Pride of Detroit, I mean, we've always been community first. Like, we do community mock drafts. In the past we've done fantasy leagues when we had a someone running Pride of Detroit that actually cared about fantasy football. Sorry. Pick'em leagues, things like that. We try, we have fan posts that I've slacked off in promoting to the front page, but that's how I came to be at Pride of Detroit. I was writing fan posts for Pride of Detroit 10 years ago, and Sean, you'll notice me, and
and yeah, I came from being a moderator on the Reddit, on the college football subreddit on reddit.com, and like I've been like moderator for various different like message boards throughout my years. Like community is internet community is hyper important to me, because I usually didn't have a lot of like, local friends, because it was a smaller place where I grew up, and it just but it was a nice way to meet people and understand. And there's some psychosis on the internet, sure, you see it with social media, but let me tell you, man, a closed circuit community versus the open like festering pit of social media, it feels completely different, and it's very comfy. It's very comfy, and we try to make sure it stays comfy. So I love that I see our Discord growing. One of the things we are going to do in this off season is there is going to be a draft and armchair GM specific channel. So by all means, like, if you want to come in and share gifts, and I think I'm going to make a meme repository too,
sure,
for Lions memes and stuff. So we hope it'll be useful to you guys. But it is something along with our Twitch where we have somehow crossed the streams between our super nerdy video games and Lions football. Go figure.
Go figure indeed. All right, I think I'm ready to send you guys elsewhere. I'm going to send you to a good Twitch friend of mine who I've actually joined on his podcast once or twice. He's playing Madden right now. Now, be nice. He is a Bears fan, and he has Bears alerts. So if you follow him or sub to him, be aware that there are going to be some Bears alerts that show up on the screen. But he's super chill, super nice guy. He's called That Dude Dev. We're going to send you guys over to him now once I get him on my little stream deck. Where are you at? There he is. Dang, he's got 1,000 viewers. He doesn't even need me. Oh, because I think he's doing some Man Live stuff. But either way, super chill dude. I hope you stick around. Enjoy him. POD Reno knows him. And then, like I said, next podcast is probably going to be Monday night. I don't think we're doing Man Sim this week unless I can think of something. So that'll probably be the next time we see you. So until then, y'all, appreciate you joining us for both podcasts tonight. If you missed either of them, again, they're going to be on the podcast. The George Payton one is going to be on tomorrow. This one is probably going to be on Saturday-ish. Or you can watch them on YouTube and Twitch. They're live once we're done here. So enjoy all that. Go see That Dude Dev. Awesome dude. Fun guy. And we will see you guys Monday night. Unless something else happens. Something could always happen. Who knows? All right, bye. All right. Twitch has been raided. Let's
really
close out
people
our
really
YouTube
out here being
stream
funny,
as
huh?
well in 3.
They just want that
2,
attention.